sport. The home of the spectacular and the unthinkable.
They get it to Fisher. He scores! Eric Fisher scores at the buzzer. It's back to Zaharakis. Zaharakis has kicked the goal. The Bombers are in front of the chain.
And it just so happens that its fellow neighbour is cinema. Combining the two then to create some properly good sports movies should be a walk in the park. Well, not exactly.
On my stage of life, hold my hand through the finest scene and all.
Take Seabiscuit. This Gary Ross-directed horse racing epic, apart from always making me cry, was a pioneer in many ways, specifically with crowds. Crowds are tough. It takes a lot of people to fill a stand or an arena, which is expensive, but you can't have your sporting moment without them. And watching filmmakers find a way to fill stadiums in their movies is almost as entertaining as the movies themselves. Rocky moved the same small group of extras around for every mid and close-up of the fights and just turned off half the lights. And it worked pretty flawlessly. And if you rock up to set and you have one extra instead of the 300 you'd planned for, well, if you're Stallone, you rewrite the scene on the spot and inadvertently create one of the best state scenes ever. But anyway, this technique of moving the same small group of extras around to create what looks like a packed arena is a lot more common than you may think. And an extension of this concept is what they call tiling. By combining different plates of the same extras in different positions and then compositing them together in post, you can get something like this. It works wonders specifically for static shots, but the crowd shots in Seabiscuit are far from static. And this is where some smart people and a whole lot of dummies came into play. So to help create depth in the crowds, a lot of the background talent weren't talent at all. No, they were blow-up dolls dressed to match the real actors in front of them. Now, the idea of supplementing real extras with fake ones wasn't a new concept in 2003. Movies had been filling stadiums with cardboard cutouts for decades. Movies like Ali, The Natural, Any Given Sunday, and D2 all use fake cardboard standees as a cheaper alternative to real extras long before production got underway on Seabiscuit. But Seabiscuit had a problem none of those other films had to deal with. See, with most sports like baseball or boxing, the crowd circles and surrounds the action, and the action all takes place inside that central area. Now, this works great for cardboard cutouts because no matter which way you turn, they're facing the camera. But horse racing is a little different. Most horse racing tracks are set up like this, with one main grandstand facing the straight. And unlike baseball or boxing, the action moves all the way around and along the track, which means if you were to follow the horse race with your camera along the straight, your perspective on the grandstand and the crowd in it would change, revealing your 2D abominations. And this is why these blow-up dolls were such a revelation. It brought those fake fans from 2D to 3D. It was like going from Super Mario Bros. To Super Mario 64. Now, this would be the part where I'd show you some BTS photos of the Seabiscuit sets filled with rows and rows of inflatable dolls. But that's the thing. There are none. Not that I could find, anyway. And a 2003 article from Variety explains why. Universal were basically terrified that people would be able to spot the dolls in the movie if word got out, so they just didn't release production photos. Even the making of documentary mentions nothing about these elusive inflatable dolls. The mastermind behind the Airhead idea, Joe Biggins, noted himself at the time that it's a weird job because I'm supposed to create something that people aren't supposed to notice. But he certainly succeeded. In fact, the blow-up mannequins were so successful that it resulted in Biggins creating a company whose whole existence would be dedicated to providing inflatable people for film sets, aptly named the Inflatable Crowd Company. You might not have ever heard of the Inflatable Crowd Company, but let me tell you, many of your favourite directors certainly have. In my research, I found credits for ICC in movies like Dodgeball, Wimbledon, $1 Million Baby, Memoirs of a Geisha, Coach Carter, Cinderella Man, Flight Plan, Step Up, The Prestige, Rocky Balboa, American Gangster, Spider-Man 3, Bronson, Whip It, Salt, Iron Man 2, and The King's Speech. I'm sorry, but that's crazy. You're telling me that this scene from Cinderella Man involved 11,000 blow-up mannequins. That is amazing. Because up close, sweet, mother of pearl. But you get far enough away, like in this wide from Changeling, and wow, look at that. It totally works. But if blow-up dolls aren't your thing, there's always VFX. The way films are made has certainly changed since Seabiscuit came out all the way back in 2003, and there's no better example of the resulting shift in film crowd techniques than in Moneyball. In a film about baseball's own revolution in thinking, Moneyball showcased how powerful VFX could be in creating believable crowds.
Wash your face and comb your hair. It's a fine time.
Rhythm and Hughes' work is pure magic, and one of the coolest parts is that these huge crowds, despite being created with VFX, are all real people. The team shot 50 different people on blue screen at 4 different angles, doing a variety of actions to give them the coverage they needed to place them anywhere in the stadium. And not only did they need to nail the randomness of a real packed arena, which even included fans walking up and down the aisles, they also had to match the stadium's lighting as well. And when all is said and done, it's just crazy how drastically their work changes the feeling of the scene. But it makes sense. A sporting moment is nothing without the crowd and fans there to witness it. A tree falling in the forest and all that. And the recent Ford v Ferrari is a great example of how far we've come in just the last 10 or so years post Moneyball. It's no longer about just filling the stands, but extending them too. And this goes for shows like Ted Lasso as well. It is genuinely incredible what is possible now with VFX and crowds. But if you don't want to use VFX or start your own inflatable people company, there's always the option to just film your scene at a real live sporting event. This summer and winter and spring, I guess, it's an all-year thing, comes a movie, a documentary, a tech review, a skateboard commercial, a YouTube video about space. That could all be possible thanks to the folks over at Motion VFX and their lovely motion graphics plugins. And from someone who makes motion graphics to be able to feed myself, these plugins are actually properly good. And there are so many. They're fully customizable too, and no matter which editing program you use, there's a plugin for you. Motion graphics are one of the most daunting aspects of my editing process, and that's especially true if you're just starting out. So I can't recommend what Motion VFX are doing any harder. So if you want to up the production quality of whatever you're creating, check out the link below. And big ups to Motion VFX for sponsoring this video.
The Cowboys continue their Super Bowl mission. It's Monday Night Football, a Christmas edition.
Nothing poetic about that. Yo, I would have taken it for the touchdown all the way, baby.
Great concentration.
Rob Tidwell's career-defining touchdown at the end of Jerry Maguire was shot during the very real Cardinals v Cowboys game that took place on Christmas Day in 1995.
As I remember, we first heard about it in the fall, winter of '95, and knew they were going to be at that final game in 1995, that Christmas game, and they were going to shoot some things in the press box and maybe some crowd scenes.
Hello again, everyone. Frank Gifford with Al Michaels and Dan Deerdorf, and welcome to Tempe, Arizona, Sun Devil Stadium.
We're at our game, and here we go. We're running out for the start of the game. We're running out, and I see this number 85, and I know that's not Rob Moore, you know, and all of a sudden, this guy's running out with us. And in my mind, I'm thinking, like, who is this guy? You know, why is he running with us? We didn't know all what was happening, when it was happening. However, we did know that there was things going on.
They came in and said, hey, halftime's gonna be a little longer because they gotta do a shooting of a segment when there's the end zone, the spin, to know that that was happening. And then when you're coming back out of the tunnel and you're seeing cameras and people walk by you, it's pretty cool, man. Cool time.
In fact, a lot of the plays from the actual game ended up in the movie.
We didn't know that it was going to become what it ultimately became, but you know, I'm happy that I was there to be kind of somewhat of a representative. I think I have a clip in the movie that's pretty famous.
Centers has it at the 30, at the 20, leaps over a defender at the 15. You can hear the Cowboys.
People actually come up to me from time to time and say, hey, I saw you in Jerry Maguire, so you know, that's kind of cool. Still waiting on my check. Show me the moolah.
It may be cloudy, so dark, I can't find my way through. But if this world don't end,
they don't make movies like those little wars, so it's great that you're all part of it.
The lightning
Chance to go. Thanks, Harry.
the thunder begin to roll.
This year's 500 is a little different. It's more than a race. It's a setting for a new motion picture from the makers of Top Gun, Days of Thunder, starring Tom Cruise right here. Now, there are 2 camera cars that will start in the back of the field. They're going to run 100 miles and then pull off. Let's go down and find out.
I'm coming back to you. Coming back to you. Darling, I'm coming back to you.
86 years of banging our heads against the big green wall. But we finally did it. That part you know. That part everybody knows. But I got a story you don't know.
Fever Pitch is about Lindsay, Drew Barrymore, finding herself wedged between her relationship with Ben, Jimmy Fallon, and his passion for the Boston Red Sox. It's a solid rom-com, but what would make this film unique would be its approach to storytelling.
Yes, I did, yo.
See, the film's storyline was to be intertwined and guided by the very real and very unpredictable 2004 Major League Baseball season.
Down the right field line.
So Drew and Jimmy would attend real games, and the performance of the Red Sox throughout the season would be weaved into the story. And partway through the season, it looked like it would be another typical sad ending for the Red Sox.
When we got on board this project, the Sox were fading fast. They were 10 games out. You know, they were just a few games over 500, and it looked like it was going to be a typical ending, and they probably wouldn't make the playoffs, and it would be a disappointing year because we had such high hopes.
The only logistics we were concerned about was when they were playing their games and how we were going to be able to shoot at them. And we were going to have to work our schedule around them. That was the only logistical thing we ever considered.
The fact that they've been losing, you know, for decade after decade, for I guess 8+ decades, was one thing that made them perfect to set our story around.
But then the Red Sox started winning.
Everything turned around. And they started winning. At one point, they won 19 out of 21.
Driven in the air to deep right field. Back is Sheffield. The Red Sox win it.
Then eventually we thought, well, what if they win? What would we do?
We didn't know we were going to be in that position at all.
And neither did the film's directors, Bobby and Peter Farrelly.
When we're starting the movie, the studio says, okay, you know, Bradley, what happens if the Red Sox win the World Series? So I go to Pete and Bobby, what happens if the Red Sox win the World Series? I can't get an answer because, see, those guys are superstitious.
So, despite the huge turnaround from the Red Sox, the ending of the script remained untouched.
Growing up with the Red Sox, you're afraid if you ever get ahead of yourselves, you're gonna jinx them. Odds were very, very good that it was not going to happen, just because that's the way of the world. The Red Sox don't win. The Yankees win.
And then the miracle, the absolute phenomenon occurred during filmmaking. It's just like not real.
The Red Sox ended up getting to the playoffs. And then they won the playoffs from a 3-game to nothing. It's just insane. It's just the first time in the history of baseball that happened.
And the reality is, it wasn't until Johnny Damon hit his grand slam, we were all watching it up here in Toronto.
Damon hits it in the air to right field. Sheffield back in the corner at the wall. A grand slam. Johnny Damon.
That I just saw this sheer panic on Pete and Bobby's eyes, like, you know, and they went home and they were like Stephen King on a typewriter, just trying to figure out what the ending was, because of their superstitions. They wouldn't address this.
But it wouldn't be until the day of Game 4 of the World Series, the day the Red Sox could clinch the series and win it all, that the production would ask themselves the big question.
We had, of course, been watching the games. It was Wednesday, October 27th, 2004, and it's the 4th game of the World Series in St. Louis, and we're shooting up in Toronto.
1 o'clock, you know, I'm hanging on the set, and Pete's like, why aren't we going to St. Louis? Well, because you said it wasn't necessary.
See, the production had decided that if the Red Sox did win the World Series, that they would, instead of filming the actual game, just attend the post-game parade, and that would be enough.
That's a mistake.
Pete was saying, we got to get him there and see if we can get him on the field.
We just like cancel the next day and go, you know what? We're gonna go to St. Louis. Pack your bags.
I think it was about 2:30 or 3:30. We were on an incredibly tight schedule. We threw everyone into one car.
And the game's only like 5 or 6 hours away, and between Pete and Mark Fisher and everyone, they pulled it together. We flew down there in a hurry, no cameras or anything.
We knew we were taking a gamble by going to St. Louis. I mean, it was a big gamble. It was a monetary gamble on Fox's behalf that this team would not do what it's done for 86 years.
But the risk of the Red Sox losing wasn't the only concern. With no pre-production in place and no cameras ready, how would they actually film Drew and Jimmy at the game?
We decided to call Fox Sports. We found out they had 22 cameras at the game, and we asked them if it would be at all possible if we could steal one with their camera. And they agreed to it. I think that Fox knew if we don't get that and they win, what it will cost to recreate that scene, to fake that scene, how cheap it would look. We sort of snuck Jimmy and Drew in with someone who was an MLB person from St. Louis, and they took them straight to the cameraman, and we didn't see them again until the 8th or 9th inning.
It was real under-the-radar filmmaking.
But the risk paid off, and the 86-year curse was finally broken.
The Sox, of course, did win that game, and they let us go on the field, and we got this footage that I don't know that anybody's ever gotten this sort of footage, because it's a real blend between a great fictionalized story and reality.
You just don't get to do things like that. You don't get to shoot your film at the World Series with a team who hasn't won for 86 years, who has this completely legendary curse on them, so to speak.
Logically, this would happen, you know, if something like this happens with the Red Sox. Well, then a year or two later, you know, someone tries to make a movie about it. The fact that we happened to be in sync with it while it was happening, it's total serendipity. To be making a movie about the 2004 Red Sox while they're going through that. My brother put it well. He said it's like making Pearl Harbor during Pearl Harbor.
Some actual moments of baseball history. You know, cameras were there. It's pretty crazy.
It was very, very stressful, but at the same time, the most fun, and nothing we ever shot ever will ever compare to it, because just to be there and to be capturing it all, it was just magical.
I mean, how can you not be romantic about baseball? And look, it's the ICC. But what if filming with a real crowd at a live game just isn't an option? Well, you recreate it.
The anchor was the locker room. It's the biggest thing in there. Sort of like establish that was the anchor of the complex, and then put a hallway off here, and an office off here and another room here, and it's a big set. It took like about 3 months to build, paint, furnish, put the carpeting and all. You know, even though it's 2002, it's dated. It's like a massive concrete structure, and we wanted to echo that through that set, which is the bottom of the Coliseum, the clubhouse. You know, you have to strip away layers that say it's 2010, even if it's lack of, new cell phones or just, the artwork. Dodger Stadium is so unique, just the color of the seats, and it's in the ravine, and it's like nothing else that you've ever seen. So it's a big location to book. That's pretty much what you're up against is, changing out signage and backstops and dressing.
My background is actually a graphic designer, so the graphics and the signage on this movie was really, really important to me.
We found archival images from the Western Automobile Club in France. They were good enough to send us images, but we also scoured the internet for absolutely every image we could possibly find. We would go through and painstakingly copy the details in each of the photographs.
We had so many signs in this movie. We had over 2 miles of banners that we created just for the Le Mans race that we recreated in Georgia. And we had hundreds and hundreds of signs made, all the graphics for the cars, all of the hard signage and the period signage.
And costumes aren't any easier.
If you're going to go back and do baseball and do Major League Baseball, you really have to get the details right. The current Major League Baseball licensee, Majestic, manufactured all these uniforms that you see. And all the licensees for Major League Baseball worked with us and did a great job.
The thing that struck me the most about this film was the attention to detail and just the uniforms in general and the amount of teams that were represented in the film. And going back to 2002, it might not seem that there were a lot of uniform changes, but there were. And so really just the wardrobe department did a tremendous job in really making sure that it was authentic to the time period.
And I think one of the coolest aspects of Moneyball is how much of the crowd shots in the film used real fans wearing their own fan merchandise.
The crowd that came in Oakland to be the baseball crowd was fantastic. They had fantastic wear for the baseball theme where there was so much variation within it, and that's the most difficult part for us to provide as a costume department. They had collected this for years, and they came with enough variations that they looked like a real crowd with bright colors and logos and variety of styles.
The production for Ford v Ferrari also found clever ways around the limitations in trying to replicate elements of the period, like car parts that just no longer existed.
There is a graphic layout for each car. Graphic designer, LA-based Jason Perrine, he put these together with the reference and the direction that I provided. This is a Rosso Corsa, which is the official Ferrari color. What you see on here is not a Ferrari red rivet, but it's actually a guide dot. We use them as rivets for the exterior bodywork of the Ferraris. The tires that are a common tire for our GT40s and the Ferraris. The GT40s ran with Goodyears. The 330 P3s, the Ferraris ran with Firestones. We weren't going to get original those or even a company to make those. So we came up with a vinyl stencil solution that we could tack onto the sidewall and paint in different ways. And that was our reliable and, faithful to the period substitute.
But it's not just what the actors are wearing or what they're driving or where they're playing that makes these moments memorable. It's also the plays themselves.
Is that the whip on Seabiscuit to keep him up?
In Seabiscuit, you're dealing with races that were widely televised, so it's pretty important that you try your darndest to replicate those races as close to the real thing as possible. And that takes a whole lot of practice.
And he came right over 2 lengths. He goes by me.
Every race that we run is a race that's in the history books. The form of each one of those races is written down. So it's very important that we have these scenes choreographed as close as we can to the original race.
In the beginning, my responsibilities were such that I would sit in on the race design meetings with Gary and Rusty the Wrangler and Dan Bradley, the stunt coordinator. And we would put together on paper what Gary's ideas were. From those notes on the paper, a plan of playbooks was developed, And we've used these playbooks throughout the racing scenes.
I had horse rehearsals for a week before we ever actually started shooting because I wanted to know that it's the best method of working.
Ricky, you're 5 in front, Ricky.
Without horses, the guys in the camera car would all pretend to do what they were doing, and the jockeys would run along the ground as if they were on horseback. Everybody knew where they were supposed to be relative to all the other pieces, and it's the thing that made it safe. And maybe one of the things I'm most proud of is that there was not an accident on our movie.
Great pains were taken in the recreation of these things to be literal about it, and that there's as little bias laid on top of it as possible. Basically began with the archival footage because there is an archive of broadcast televised baseball that documents what happened. We not only drew from that to choreograph what happened on the field, but it's intercut with the footage that we shot just to reinforce and heighten the understanding that this really happened.
The cast of Coach Carter also trained for up to 12 hours a day to nail the plays when the cameras inevitably started rolling.
By the time we started breaking down the script, there were over 70 plays to be learned. You cannot go in, give the kids a basketball and let them play and hope that you're going to get it. You only have a very short period of time to shoot the action and tell the story, and you better very quickly have a well-oiled plan and be a well-oiled machine going into a shooting day.
And this was especially true for Channing Tatum, who had no real basketball experience before being cast as Jason Lyle for the film.
Coach Ellis and Coach Fernando stayed with me after practice every day. And we just got through it. You know, it was so embarrassing I was always pretty athletic. And I came out here and I've never played basketball before and it was terrible.
And how you choose to shoot these moments during production is key too. And how Coach Carter did it was next level.
I'm doing the pre-visualization. What we've done here is the gym that we're at right now, and what I've done is scanned in the drawings from Coach Ellis and have animated the players so that they're doing the exact same thing. So they're passing the ball to and from each other. The animation's rough, but it's definitely he passes it to this guy, and then this guy lays it up.
Sort of taking storyboarding to the next level. You could sort of see all your angles and motion in 3D models in the computer.
We can test different kinds of lenses, so here's a wider angle lens, and we could actually just kind of come up and get a really cool shot looking down the net.
So here you go from watching. Then you take it.
This is one of the camera compositions that I worked on with Thomas, and he decided that he liked that. So we know that it's a 27mm lens, and that from the intersection of the half-court line to the sideline pier, it's over 2 feet and up 13.5 feet, and we'll get that exact camera composition. So that's what we're doing. So it's basically a way of storyboarding it, but in three-dimensional form.
And for Seabiscuit, it all started with director Gary Ross's desire to shoot inside the action instead of from the stands.
One of the things I realized is I'm going to have to be able to film Toby seeming to be on a racehorse, interacting with the jockeys around him, often having dialogue. All those things require an intimacy. I have to get the camera here. I asked Michael Lantieri to see if he could commission a vehicle for me. Basically a flatbed camera platform that could move around the track so I could put Toby in the context of other horses around him, as well as the grandstand, the world whizzing by, and really put him in the environment.
These are two equicizers. I took them all apart, rebuilt the frames, put motors on them, and sculpted thoroughbred heads to put on them so we could have lifelike horses that would go down a track. It has all the controls for every aspect of the horses. It can run the horses forwards and backwards, put them together for a bump or an inquiry, make their heads change speed.
And what did they call this rig?
We put the entire crew on here and go for the ride, and because it's built like an aircraft carrier, we call it the SS Seabiscuit.
And that, my friends, is why this thing that you've seen in behind-the-scenes footage from countless movies since is constantly referred to as
the biscuit.
The biscuit.
The biscuit rig.
The biscuit rig. And that's called the biscuit rig.
And it all started here on a horse racing movie 20 years ago. and a little less high octane, but lighting plays its part too.
I tried to do something different with the nighttime baseball material in that if you look out at one of these stadiums, generally all the lights in the stadium are turned on to create a very even light for the television cameras and for the viewers that are there, for the audience. In the case of what we're doing, I wanted to have a little more mood to it, and I thought it'd be more filmic if we were able to turn off a lot of the lights. So in general, I shut off about half the stadium lights. I did that very judiciously and tried to find a formula that seemed to work where I could make it more filmic and a little bit darker, but still within the reality of what baseball looks like at night.
But all this would be for nothing if not for some proper sky-shattering atmosphere. Whether it's the sound of the brakes in Ford v Ferrari, or the silence before the ruckus in Moneyball. The sound of the moment makes these scenes what they are. It's what transforms this to this.
No explanation for what's occurring right now. It's bigger than us.
A whole bunch of superstitions going on. They have to do the same things. They keep the snakes alive.
When you work inside the business, you realise if the sound is poor, you're lost. Doesn't matter how beautiful it looks. Doesn't matter how good the performance is. If the sound is poor, they will disconnect. So it's your umbilical cord, but it's an invisible one. Obviously, you can't feature a bit of it in a magazine and go, there, look at that. And of course, that's its magic, and that's its power, because it is working on you in a way that you don't know. And when it's used truly and properly, is an immense part of the impact of cinema.
When you record a car, especially a high-performance car, there's probably 15 to 20 microphones that are set about the car, the exhaust, in the cabin, on the engine block, any place you can think that might generate sound. You may want to hear one element and not the others, and then you won't know until you match it to the picture that you're shooting it for.
And editing plays its part too.
Editing to me is almost like the writing process in a way. You're there, you muse, you try things, you try other things, you sort of digest it.
I would say the day of the match race is one of the defining scenes in the movie in terms of style and also in terms of excitement. You know, really what the movie's all about. You're following this race from the time you learn that War Admiral is this arch enemy, basically, of Seabiscuit, and then it's such a sort of wild journey to get there. When you finally get there, there's so much emotion wrapped up in the race, and it's really classically cut, because I want those pieces to play longer. Because I don't want it to be incredibly chopped up like modern movies are cut and feeling like it's out of place within the period of the film. People who watch that particular scene, a lot of times are brought to tears. And I think that's just a credit to everybody, from the costumer to the director to the DP to everybody. And it all just came together, and it really, I think, defines what the movie is.